We are live. Really excited for episode 78, which is entitled Stop Overpaying for Unemployment Compliance. Here's how. Josh Goodman is the president of Pinnacle Unemployment Services and Consulting. Josh and I have met many times at Chamber of Commerce events and thought this would be a really great topic to dive into as we think about scaling businesses. But Josh, before we dive in, I'd like to ask you the question we ask all our guests, which is, what's on your mind?
Well, I've been in the business for 30 years, and let's be clear, the business is representing company in their unemployment matters. And I've been kind of overwhelmed at the increases in cost to companies and the complication of the regulations that go into managing the claimants and their claims and the costs of these companies and charging issues like the company has to pay it, it doesn't have to pay the claim, and how frustrated, upset, and scared companies become. 30 years and my own company for 10 years now as of August. And, I want to answer questions. I want to give my experience and I want to help people, specifically companies, to relax a little and provide some knowledge so that, people aren't so stressed out. But you plan a budget as a company and you want to reach a certain goal. And all of a sudden, a new claim comes in from employee ABC and they're like, well, our budget's blown. How are we going to pay this out?
Subject, can I just ask you a question? Like,
sure.
The companies start putting together budgets when they are tiny little startups, right? Immediately.
Sure.
Should the tiny little startups start considering unemployment matters, or is it a matter of growth and scale and that issue comes later?
Sure. So payroll and unemployment is immediate. When you register as a new LLC or corporation or whatever it is, part of that registration is to sign up for an unemployment account. So, and that means that you're through your payroll service or internally uploading wages to the unemployment division and obtaining those costs within the first quarter of being in business immediately. And that's where I get a call 2 years after a company has been in business. And they say, oh my God, what happened? I wasn't aware of this. So to answer your question directly, yes, right away. Think about it right away, and you can budget for that cost immediately.
When I first started working as a software engineer, I started working in 2000, and you probably remember, Josh, what happens in 2001 in that industry. It was just like everything fell out the bottom, and so I found myself unemployed very soon after that, and so here I am. Mid-20s, or maybe I was in my late 20s at the time. I have no idea what I'm doing in the real world. It was like my first real job. I had been working at like a lab in France or something right before that. And I don't know what I'm doing. So I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm getting these letters that says you have to sign every time you work for anybody for any reason or whatever. You have to tell us, or else you could jeopardize your benefits. And then people get mad because you did that. And it's like, there's like some mismatch of education. It's like people think that just because, they get mad at the person who has, who's unemployed, who's never dealt with this before. Is that story ring true? I mean, that's my experience. So.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, of course, there's this thing called the pandemic, right? So yeah. I think that's what at first I thought you were saying this guy that I'm talking to is just old. But then I realized you're talking about the pandemic and when that started. But the bottom line is I've heard all those stories, and I've had companies call me and they say, Josh, and I'm going to leave some blanks here, this blankety blanking person is on my benefit charge statement. What a piece of blankety blank. How could this happen? Why is this person doing this to me?
Right, exactly.
Right. And the person simply separated from a subsequent company, another company after they worked there through no fault of their own. Especially in the pandemic, they were laid off. And unemployment systems, I won't talk just about Massachusetts, all of them, every state is different. They have a reach back period. All right. Mm-hmm. In some states, it's the first 4 of the last 5 full calendar quarters from the claim date. And in Massachusetts, it's the first 4 full calendar quarters. Every company that uploaded wages within that base period, those 4 quarters, gets a notification that says employee ABC, former employee, filed the claim, and you are, and the key term is potentially liable, right? Mm-hmm. So it's the potential. People freak out. They see the numbers and they go, we have to pay this son of a whatever, did this to us. And it's just not true. It's the rules and regulations within the unemployment system that every company is notified. There are interested party employers. That's the separating employer. And they decide whether or not the person can collect based on those circumstances. And then there's the non-interested party, which just means you're further down in the base period. You can still avoid those charges. And if somebody, for example, quit for another job, all these companies have to do is fill out a form that says they quit for another job. They send it into unemployment. As long as they don't miss a deadline, they're going to avoid those charges. So people aren't doing it on purpose. They're just filing a claim based on their current circumstances. And companies have to realize that if you have some knowledge, it's not the end of the world. You just have to meet the deadline and react properly and know how the regulations work. And you can move on and have peace. Not blame somebody. They're just using the system that's available to them within the law.
Right. Well, so Josh, on the company side, what do you see, what are the biggest you sort of started to allude to this, like what are the biggest mistakes that small companies that are scaling, what are the biggest mistakes that they make?
Sure. I think that companies, especially small companies when they're first starting, they just don't realize that what's going to happen with an unemployment claim, and 9 times out of 10 it's going to happen, because we just talked about the fact that you can go out and work another job for 8 months, file a claim, and those charges come back to you. Right. So they don't realize that when those charges are coming back to you, up to a year and 3 months after the separation, you may have to pay this claim. And all the things that happened when the employee was still there is what's going to impact avoiding those charges, right? So the employee's there, they're poor performers, or there's a dispute, and the small, business owner says, you know what, I'm just starting this company, you're done, or get out of here, or I've had enough of you, go home and don't come back. And then they're so happy about, they don't have to deal with this person because it was a non-amicable relationship. And then they get that claim and they get a notice, and the notice has a dollar figure attached, and it asks, can you please provide the details of what occurred with this separation? So it's a matter of companies knowing the cost and preparing and being a little bit more or a lot more careful about how they interact with an employee while they're there. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of the key to all of this, because, when you're a small company, an unexpected $10,000 claim, and, they also don't realize unemployment is a dollar for dollar system, right? Mm-hmm. You get a $10,000 claim, you're going to pay out $10,000, and that's it. It's the law, and you have to pay it, but you have to prepare for the separation. And I think that's what companies need to do.
So I would just like to build on that. At least in the small business environment, this is very often an overlooked issue, mm-hmm. right? Because the teams are focused on building, the teams are focused on growing, and they don't want to separate, but yet sometimes they have to separate, and educating yourself on unemployment matters falls way behind. What resources and what should business owners, startup founders be looking at to educate themselves?
Sure. So, I got to say it's unfortunately very uncharted territory for educational materials when it comes to the unemployment system. If you were to depend on the state agency itself, like the Department of Unemployment Insurance, they have an employer handbook, all of them. At this point, it's more like something that you would find online on their website. And it reads in a lot of these states a lot like stereo directions or like putting together an IKEA table or something like that. There's no explanation. So it's difficult. It's fairly easy to find. So if you can navigate the state handbook, you'll do okay. But if you have a lot of questions and you're like, what does this mean? What does this mean? There's really no place to go. I think there are some law firms out there who publicly post some, you just do a Google search and it'll be a certain law firm and they'll say, let's break this down. But it's just a blurb. But it is a pretty good resource, maybe your attorney or something like that. And then there are unemployment representation agencies like mine. And I'm not toting my own agency. I'm just saying in your local area or whatever it may be, maybe you can go to somebody like that. As time goes on and the regulations become more complicated, there's more and more services that can help you. I would say that as far as I'm concerned, that's your limitation. It's actually understanding the material. The other thing you can do is every unemployment regulation is listed with precedent decisions that have been made in the past, but they're very kind of law language related. So you read some of those and you go, I'm not a lawyer. I don't understand what this means. It is another resource. You can go through precedent decisions of this situation and uncover them and kind of, plow through that material and try to figure out based on past precedent, what is going to happen with your present case. But that's to answer your question, some kind of resources. I think step one is go to the state, go to their website and find out what their employer related handbook. They're really trying to help companies, but it's complicated.
And can I ask a question about like 1099 versus W-2? Maybe this is too detailed, but I'm just sort of curious. Like a lot of small businesses, I think, handle their employment by bringing somebody on as a consultant,
right.
And maybe part-time. Can you just talk to that like distinction? Does bringing someone on as a 1099 consultant lead to the need to pay if there's an unemployment filing? How does that work?
Sure. So 1099 employment are true independent contractors. Okay. So, we'll use the very old widget. We have a company that makes widgets. They bring on somebody, even if it's a temporary basis, under 1099 contractorship to work and make those widgets. They're doing the same thing that the company does. Maybe it's a special project and they think the company itself think they're going to be relieved of the unemployment burden because there's no taxes involved.
Right.
But the bottom line is they're not meeting the federal description of 1099 versus W-2. So that employee separates. They say, okay, our contract is ended. Employee, they're right to go out and open a claim. The company gets a notification and they're saying, why are we getting this? It's not, we hired them 1099. They don't have unemployment rights and we don't have to pay this. Well, when a state or even the unemployment division or the federal government defines somebody as a independent contractor or 1099 independent contractorship, they have a 3-point legal test to put them in that category. And it's a lot of separation between the company. So if the company is bringing them in, they're giving them a schedule. They can hire them. This person doesn't have their own company. They're not an LLC. And they have direction and control over the employee. They're saying, hey, we don't like the way you perform this job. They're not ending the contract. They're firing them. It's just not true independent contractorship. And you can appeal through the unemployment division and say, hey, this person was a 1099. Why do we have to pay this? You go to the hearing, and the unemployment division, the review officer or the review examiner or the hearing officer you're going to be saying all of these things. They're going to break it down. Is this true independent contractorship? Do they have their own business card? You're making widgets. Did you bring them in to paint the walls or to install carpeting? Because that's true independent contractorship.
Right.
These people are here doing what you hire everybody else to do. You should have been paying them W-2. You have direction and control. Sometimes when the company says, okay, here's where you're going to be working, here's your desk, that's already over, right? They've given them a space. They're doing what the company does. It's not independent contractorship. So, I work through the definitions of what it is. And then I explain to the company, this is not 1099. You can hire them that way and you can call it that. But if they, go to the IRS, you may end up paying back taxes and take on all the responsibilities, including overtime. So it's a very sticky area. I think there's very little knowledge within not corporations, but beginners and small companies where they're like, hey, look at us, we're saving money, we're doing great, and let's just cut the contract, get rid of them, we'll never hear from them again. 4 months later or immediately that unemployment claim comes in. In the cases where I'm the consultant, I explain it to them step by step. Listen, they work for you, they have a desk there, they have a schedule, that's a problem. You make the schedule and you control, or you have direction and control over these people, not 1099, and you're going to have to pay this claim. So that's it.
So Josh, just switching gears a little bit, obviously you have gone through this building your own business. So I'd love to hear kind of that story, and how did you end up sort of in this particular niche?
Sure. So I started out in the restaurant business. I have a degree from Johnson & Wales University, and I started out kind of doing some chef stuff and more importantly, restaurant management. For me, managing people is like managing a wild rabid dog. It just didn't work for me. So I thought maybe HR, even though it's very people related, there's some good guidelines there would be good for me. And I ended up working for a company for 15 years that wasn't exactly human resources. They were unemployment representatives. But what's important is that for all that time, I was able to build myself into a consultant. And I'm really good at telling people what to do. I'm really bad at following through and doing it myself with an actual human being in front of me. And I'm really good at interpreting laws and then walking away and not having to execute the advice I just gave. And I'm like, I love this. This is great. When I started really enjoying it, I started building on the fact that not only are you good at this, but this is so your niche. And you don't have to do the suffering of, walking in and being a leader as far as interacting with a human being and getting them to listen to you and understand you and execute and follow up and all of those things. I can admit when I have them, and that is a big fail for me. It's just not my thing.
Right.
This is like making me think of that moment in the movie Office Space where he's like, you're perfect for saying you're perfect for consulting.
That's right. And I had that conversation with myself.
That's good.
So as far as building my own business, the bigger you grow, the more people you have to manage, right? And I already know I'm a failure at that. So I have spent more time doing everything myself than probably most businesses out there. And I've made it 10 years with just one employee. So that's how I do it. That's my big secret. is hire less, work more.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, we have gotten to the moment in our show where ChatGPT wants to weigh in with a couple of questions. So I always like to ask, do you want absurd first or thought-provoking first?
I don't work with AI very much. So this would be a good test to see how absurd we can get.
All right,
Okay.
let's see. All right, I don't know if this is absurd, but it's funny. It says, be honest, how many times have you had to explain to your relatives that unemployment compliance isn't the same as being unemployed? Maybe never.
Okay. I've had
That's like saying it's like saying you're a day like that.
Right. I have a son who's 22. So I've had to explain a lot of things to him and other family members that were absurd and outrageous. The answer to the question, Mr. AI person, is so far 0 with that specific question. Okay.
But there are other things that that have come up.
You don't even want to hear, but yes, I am used to explaining.
We probably do want to hear, and I may ask you to follow up on that after Jeff's second question.
Okay. All right. I'll hold on to that.
So my second question, I don't know, this may be a good one or not. I'm not sure. We'll go with it. But if you had $1 for every time someone ignored your compliance advice, would you even need this job?
That's a good one.
Something that I can do that's enjoyable is when people ignore my advice, especially clients, it's such a major negative financial impact on them that there's no way I have to prove that I gave them the right information, that they have to depend on me, and that they made a mistake, right? All they have to do is show me the check that they're writing where the loss is, which shouldn't make me happy. But it really,
what is that called? Schadenfreude, is that the name of it? Is that how
that's
that
right.
German?
It prevents a lot of debates and me proving myself. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Before we get into the absurd story, I was going to ask, do you think AI is going to be eligible at some point for unemployment benefits?
I can tell you this right now. I'm working on a project with AI. I have an engineer that's working on it. And at the same time, I represent companies. I have one large client that sends every one of their employees that's having a problem with unemployment. Okay. And these employees are waiting on the phone so long to just speak to an adjuster or a representative. And I have a friend that just went to Wendy's and spoke to AI to put in their order for the first time. Okay. I think that if unemployment is not working on it, and a lot of these systems are so antiquated, we're still faxing responses to them. But if unemployment systems could have an AI representative speak to claimants, I think we could bring the call queue down to 30 minutes versus 2 hours. And there'd be a lot of people who are a lot happier. Also, there's so many financials that go into, the communication between unemployment and companies. There's a lot of posting on a website now. So, the simple answer to your question is, and I know we're still joking around a little bit, but, the call queue, there's so many things that you could plug in that would help these seriously antiquated, outdated, unemployment systems. It's just unbelievable.
Well, and there's a little bit of I don't know if you'd call this like a chicken and egg problem going on here, but like the queues are really long because they're not using AI. But the other piece of the puzzle is that the queues are going to get longer also because of AI, because at some point AI is just going to disrupt all these industries. I mean, we're already seeing the increase of people losing their jobs and being let go and whatever. I actually believe that in the long run, this will work itself out. But in the short run, there's going to be a lot of disruption and the inability of the unemployment systems to handle more unemployed people is going to be a real problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right about the it's such a new technology a guy like me can go all the way back to when the internet started.
Yeah.
And you just have to look at the time that's passed and how quick everything is now and how much things have changed. I think everything that updates in a state agency, the unemployment system is always the last. There's no budget for it and all these different things. But I don't think it's coming anytime soon for an unemployment system. But when it comes, it will be very helpful. So.
All right. So now back to the the most absurd stories that you are able to tell us legally from your experience with weird unemployment situations.
Absurd in what way? A company losing money?
Whatever it is, whatever, like the first one that comes to mind, you're like, oh, here's a good one.
Okay. The unemployment hearings used to be in person. Okay. You had to go in person. There was very little phone hearings, and there certainly was no virtual hearings. Right. So there were many times where I would show up to a hearing to represent a company, and the claimant was there, and they were really upset that I was there, right? I was there to take money out of their pocket and argue this case down. And I was getting, at the time, pretty good at cross-examination and going to hearings and making sure that the company wins. I've been working on it a long time. And there was a time where a claimant was so upset. We left the hearing, and I was just gloating. I was like, he was lying. Did you hear my cross-examination? Man, I blew that guy up. The employer was happy. And I said, we really saved you a lot of money here. That's great. And the claimant was in the parking lot, revving up his Harley, ready to take me down. So he went up on the sidewalk unexpectedly, and I was wearing one of my best suits. I had to dive out of the way and do a nice little roll in the grass just to avoid getting hit by a motorcycle. And so when the pandemic came, I was so absolutely thrilled that I didn't have to go, because these hearing divisions, where there were hearings, they're like administrative offices. There was never security or anything like that. That, to me, to go work for a company and end up having to save your own life was one of the most absurd things that's ever happened to me. That was in Hartford, Connecticut.
So I feel like there's like a movie, like a movie series like that, Ben Affleck, The Accountant. You could have the it could be like a movie series.
That's right.
Well, I mean, that brings up an interesting point, which is like people get upset for good reason. This is their ability to pay for their family's food. It's their ability to have health care. I mean, we've set up the U.S. and maybe you have opinions on this, but I think the more I think about it and the older I get, the more I realize like we are set up in a way that creates this sort of dependency for just basic needs on our employment. And it's I think I have some rebalancing to do, but I don't think there's any will to do it, particularly right now.
Yeah. And I can respond to that by saying that we talked about companies that get a claim, they just react and they don't understand what's going on. What a lot of people that file a claim don't understand is that this is not a welfare system, right? There are regulations, and this motorcycle, person that we're talking about, the other part of the story, and this is to answer your question, is that person thought unemployment was a welfare system, right? They walked in there saying, this is mine. I'm owed this because the company fired me. The backstory is that this guy had access to company funds and stole, $80,000. It was embezzlement. So that is if you can prove it as a company, that's a disqualification.
Right.
And you don't just, right? So there may be adjustments we need to look at with a welfare type system. But the unemployment system has these regulations because it's as a term most people are familiar with, the person who I'm trying to deny their benefits and protect the company and save them money has committed a final act of willful misconduct. And they don't have the right to collect. And the company already has been harmed and lost money. And it's emotional, but at the same time, you know, I have claimants that get involved in the hearing and they say, let's not even have this hearing. I did it. I feel really guilty. I'm sorry. And you know what? Let's not proceed anymore. I feel terrible. I'm so sorry, everybody. And, you know, they have a good understanding that they did something wrong and this isn't their own benefit versus, you know, people are like, this is mine. This is mine. I'm going to get this. And they're very shocked when they go to a hearing. There's a representative there. And I'm just going through asking them these questions. Did you receive the handbook? Did you sign the handbook? Did you read this policy? You're responsible for this. You've harmed the company. Why did you do this? What's your mindset? And it starts to set in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, Josh, we have hit the 30-minute point and then some. And when we, before we end, what we like to do is we like to go around and have everybody say one thing they want to leave our audience with. What I don't tell you in the beginning before the episode, start with, and so you have no time to think about what you're going to say, but it's also a topic you are very familiar with. So I'll let you go. By the way, I get to go last because this is like I organize this segment. So that's my benefit, my prerogative. But anyway, I'm giving you a little time to think. So go for it.
Okay. So I have the floor, so to speak, right?
Yes.
Okay. I think there's a couple of things we touched upon today very quickly. And one of them is that, in its simplest form, unemployment is expensive, right? For companies. Startups, it's worse. I think that the knowledge out there of startup companies, small companies, and even some corporations, not as much, but, you know, they have their HR managers to help protect them. I think that it's very expensive, but the information to avoid this liability and when they can avoid it and when they can't is minimal. And I think because of that lack of information, and one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that companies and claimants, this is emotional. You know, it's not just numbers and dollar figures. It's expensive. It can be dramatic and painful to people. And if you can kind of, you can save a lot of time, effort, and emotion by getting educated and making the right moves. That's all.
Yep. Great. Jeff, you're on mute.
Sorry, I was muted. It's a little loud here. I was going to say thank you for joining us. It's been great, very educational. Learned a ton. Before I give my one thing, what's the best place for people to reach you if they want to connect with you?
Sure. So there are all kinds of platforms out there, but I really like direct connection. I like to talk and, you know, communicate through email. So my email is jgoodman@pinnacle-usc.com. And I have a direct line, 508-425-6991. I do free consulting. It's not about contracts and conversations. So we can just talk about your issues.
And are you Massachusetts focused only, or are you nationwide?
No, every state has a completely different unemployment system. I have clients all over the United States.
Good to know. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. So my one thing, I think, I'm going to go back to this conversation about small businesses really thinking about this stuff early. I think that's, it's I guess it's sort of obvious and sort of not obvious, right? Like you're sitting there, you're trying to get a business up and running. You've got a million things to do. So easy to sort of be like, yeah, I'm not going to deal with this right now. But I think, your point is well taken. Like think of it as soon as you start hiring people, you got to be thinking about this because you're already part of the system, whether you like it or not. So that's my one. Go ahead.
Sorry. I think small businesses think the fees are going to be exorbitant to speak with a consultant. And my fees and a lot of other companies, their fees are adjustable by the size that the company they're working with. So don't be scared. Reach out and see if you can get help.
Absolutely. Elena?
So on my end, I actually want to talk about 1099 versus W-2, because there is a resurgence of fractional work now, right? There is now fractional executives, and that's very much a new way of doing things. And largely they are 1099. So it's good for both sides to know what it means, both for the employer who thought that they've saved a lot of money, and also for the executive who thinks that they're not eligible for anything because they are 1099. So I'm going to bring that to light, and I thank you for that message.
You're welcome.
And so my one thing I think is I think this is a very, unfortunately, timely episode. I think there's a lot of people, at least in my network, particularly in the biotech industry, that I'm seeing a lot of people losing their jobs, science in general, just because of some of the things that are going on. I think tariffs could have impact on companies' ability to, keep hiring and keep people on. And of course, as Jeff was talking about earlier, AI having this major impact on people's jobs and what those jobs are. So the point I would just leave with is just that this is a really important conversation, because there's going to be a lot of people who are going to need to, either as an employer or as a employee or ex-employee, going to be having to deal with this system. So thank you, Josh, for joining us. Really interesting. And Jeff and I have this business, Twinning Edge, that we work on. So at some point, Jeff and I have to figure out when we need to jump into this as well. Maybe right before, if Jeff's going to fire me, maybe I have to, sure.
Yeah. If Jeff's going to fire you, just give me a call. We'll talk.
Yes, I'll give you a call. All right. Well, thank you so much, Josh. Fantastic conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having me.